we'll go ahead and we'll perform the next hands-on, and this is on the like domain 4, 5, and 6, where this is an end-to-end hands-on, guys, where we will be building a resilient AWS infrastructure to withstand the hardware failovers and to get notified using SNS from scratch. So that is what we are going to build right now. We'll build a resilient AWS architecture. Now stay with me. It has some series of steps. I want you to follow along with me so that you can get the overall picture as what is happening right here. Let me go ahead and do that. Here, when we talk about this scenario, okay, of this building the resilient infrastructure, so we've got various things. I'm going to show you how we can create a VPC, how to configure the internet gateway, and how to create public and private subnets. And I'll show you each and everything, guys. I'll show you each and everything, how to configure the route table, how to configure the security group, and everything. Let's go ahead and do that activity. I'll start my VPC. Okay, so I'll start by creating a new VPC. Now, in order to create a VPC, I'll search for the same. I'll search for VPC. Okay, next, what I'm going to do is here we've got your VPCs. So here this is going to tell us what are the VPCs that have been given to us. Okay, next I'm going to create VPC. For the name, I'm going to mention as my VPC. This is the name that I'm going to say. And for the IPv4 CIDR block, I'll mention the CIDR code. I'll write as 10.0.0.0/16. And for the IPv6 CIDR block, I'll keep the default value which says as no IPv6 CIDR block. And for tenancy, I'll leave it as default. I'll just come down and I'll create a VPC. So once VPC is created, okay, so currently it says it has failed to load rule groups. That's still fine for me as of now. Okay, I'll click on my your VPCs. So here we can see that my VPCs is now visible. Next, I'll just go ahead and I'll create and configure the internet gateway. In order to do that, I'll just go ahead and I'll select my internet gateway right here. And I'm going to create an internet gateway. Now for the name, I'll say it as my internet gateway. Now once this is done, I'll create my internet gateway. Now once this is done, so I'll just go ahead and I'll show it to you. So I'll just select the one that I've created right now. Okay, now next I'll say attach to VPC. Now for the VPC, I'll attach to the VPC that is my VPC that we have created right now. And I'll select this button which says attach internet gateway. So this internet gateway that we have just created, it is attached to the VPC that we have configured few minutes back. Now once this is done, we'll have to go ahead and create the public and private subnet. Now on the left hand side, we've got subnet, and I'll create my subnet and I'll select my VPC ID as my VPC. And for this subnet 1 of 1, I'll write something like this. I'll say my public subnet. Okay. And for the availability zone, I'll select my US East 1A, and IPv4 CIDR block. I'll mention 10.0.1.0/24. This is what I would specify right now. Next, I'll just come further down and I'll say create subnet. So this is going to create a subnet for me. Now, along with this, I'm also going to create 2 private subnets so that we can use it for our RDS instance. First, I'm going to create my first private subnet. So I'll create a subnet again. My VPC ID is the same, my VPC, and subnet name, I'll say my private one. And for the availability zone preference, I'll mention it as US East 1A, and CIDR block 10.0.2.0/24. So this is what I would specify right now. Now, once this is done, I'll create my subnet. So I've created my private subnet. Now, along with that, I'll create one more. So one more private subnet, I'll attach it to, I'll specify the same VPC, that is my VPC, and I'll say my private 2. Okay. So this is going to create the same, and this time for the availability zone, I'll mention it as US East 1B, and for CIDR block 3.0/24. Okay, this is how I'll specify my IPv4 CIDR block. Now we have mentioned the key value, then we'll create the subnet. Now, once this is done, the next thing that we have to do is we'll have to create a public and private route table. Now, in order to do the same, I'll click on my route table. And now here, I'll go ahead and create a new route table. For the name, I'll mention it as public route table. For the VPC, I'll select my VPC, which we have created earlier. And for the tags, I'll use the tag as it is, and I'll create route table. Now we have to add a route to allow the internet traffic to my VPC. So I'm going to select this button which says as edit routes. Okay. Now I'm going to add a route. Now while adding the route, so I'll specify something like this. I'll add a route. My destination is 0.0.0/0. Okay. And for my target, I'll mention my internet gateway. So I'll mention it like this. This is my internet gateway which we have created. Okay. So this is my internet gateway. And once I specify this, I'm going to save changes. So I'm now configured my route table. Now, once this is done, next I'll have to associate the subnet to my route table. I'll click on the subnet association and I'll edit my subnet association. Now here in this scenario, we've got my public subnet and my private one and my private two. So I'm going to select my public subnet. Okay. Now what I'll do from here is I'll click on my save association. So I'll click on this button which says save association. This has been associated right now. Next, what I'll do right now again is I'll go ahead and I'll create a route table. Now this time for the route table, I'll mention the name as private route table. So this will create my private route table and my VPC as my VPC that we have created earlier. I'll create this route table. Now I'm going to associate the subnets for this route table. So I'll select subnet association, edit subnet association. This time I'm going to select private one and private two, and I'll click on the save association. This route table has like association with the private with my private, which I have mentioned earlier. Now, once this is done, we'll have to go ahead and create the security group for EC2 and RDS. So I'll go to my EC2 service. Now, once I'm inside this EC2 service, I'll start by creating a new security group. Here, we've got the security groups. Okay, I'll create a new security group. And for the security group name, I'm going to say EC2 server security group. And for the VPC, this time I'm going to mention my own VPC that we have created earlier. Next, I'm going to add my inbound rule. I'll set it as SSH, and this is available from anywhere. I'll select it as anywhere IPv4. Now, once this is done, I can just go ahead and do the necessary things. I'll just go ahead and say create security groups. Okay, so this has created my security group. Next, I'm going to create a security group for my RDS as well. I'll click on the security group again, and I'll create a new security group. And I'll say the security group like this, RDS AC, like multi-zone, multi-availability zone RDS. And I'll mention it as SG for RDS. And for the VPC, I'll select my VPC. Next, once this is done, I'm going to edit the inbound rules. Now for the inbound rules, I'll select my MySQL/Aurora. And for this one, for CIDR blocks, I'm going to assign the security group, which is what we have created earlier. See, this is the security group which we had created earlier. I'll assign the one which is my EC2 security group, which I had created earlier. Now, after this, I'll click this button which says create security group.